Hello everyone, how's it going? Today we're joined by two excellent poets, Bernadette Gallagher and Anton Floyd. It's an honour to MC this. We're going for a good treat, I say. So Bernadette will be up first, and then we Anton, and then we're going to have a very quick Q&A. So yeah, Bernadette Gallagher is a Cork poet and author of The Rising Tree, Revival Press 2024, her debut collection. Her work has been published in The Chronog, Agenda, The Singing Fly, The North, Stony Thursday, Sad Word, Fragmore Papers, and O'Vale's 5 Words. Give her one more.
Thanks very much for that lovely introduction. So hello out there to the audience here and the audience in Donegal or wherever you are listening. You're very welcome. 8 years ago, I read for the Winter Warmer Festival as part of the closed mic event. Winter Warmer 2016 was held in the Kino. It was cold, very cold, but warmth was exuded from an enthusiastic audience. Ovale has been an important community for me since I started reading work in public about 10 years ago. Thanks to Paul Casey for his support back then and now. I may not be there in person so much anymore, but I feel a strong connection with the Ovale family of poets and writers. The poems I will read are all published in various journals and some in my debut poetry collection, The Risen Tree, published by Revival Press earlier this year. As time is limited, it might be best if you hold off any applause until the end. Thank you. The Risen Tree. Like a tree that grows beside a stream. Psalm 1:3. On my run yesterday, I noticed a tree, fallen, branches growing straight up. There must have been at least 20, though I didn't stop to count. I think of all the dead below us, feeding us, sustaining us, wanting us to go on. How soon we forget, need to forget, to go on. Another runner runs towards me, fast stride and a greeting that only runners share. He buoys me up and I feel my pace increase. I go on as he goes on. So that was the title poem. That is the title poem from the Risen Tree collection. November plants. You are my son. Today I've become your father. Psalm 2:7. Our car is packed with tomatoes off the vine, lettuce, spinach, kale, and February orchid. It's not what it seems. This orchid is not an orchid, although it has the name. It's brassica. We all have our names, but that is all they are. One's name may be changed or shortened. I abbreviated mine before I was 20. Later, I adopted the name given to me at birth. Our son is known by different names. We call him what we named him. His friends and partner have their own names for him. He is still ours, whatever the name. He is himself. These fruits we bring as an offering. That was one of Christine Cronin, a lovely librarian friend of ours. She brought my book on holiday and she said to me that was her favourite, so that was for Christine. To paraphrase the American writer Ursula Le Guin, everything spoken is shaped by the person who hears it. You will have your own interpretations of what these poems are saying, and your understanding is as valid as any explanation I might offer. The next few poems are published in journals, but not in the Risen Tree, to which I will return before the end of my reading. Hanging number 2. There is no story that is not true. Chinua Achebe, for JL. I relax in Inchidani reading Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I follow his life, page after page, afraid for what is to come for Okonkwo. You, walking your dog in the wood near your house, encounter a man hanging. As if you were a squirrel, you scaled that tree and brought him to ground. You did not know his name, then or now, but know that he lives. 24 hours later, I entered a different forest, but could do nothing to save Okonkwo. I think we've all experienced synchronicity at some points in our lives, and hanging number 2 touches on that phenomenon for me. Beyond. After Narcissus Beyond by John Philip Murray, 2015. In Memoriam, JJM. 1. He has reached the world below, breaks through as a gull dives for fish. The stream is calm above, mirror image reflects the sky. Water laps at the forest roots. The world is upside down. A magician throws a bolt of linen dyed to blue. A loose thread unravels. Narcissus hangs upside down, half above, half below, frozen in time. A stage is set, curtain raised, all darkness beyond. 2. Paint does not quell the sound of breaking water or silence the cry of a mother and wife. A December day you breached the cold, on or about the 1st. Ripples close over as brown paper covers a book. The yellow-eyed dace kept you company, even though your eyes were closed. Unlike Narcissus, they pulled you out, sodden and too heavy to hold. Near Rings Farm, County Cork. Newborn calf calls for his mother. Goldfinch and mate dance in midair. We talk of war and peace. Walk along the front line, a line so fine we cannot find it. Maybe we have already crossed over. Cuckoo flower waves in the wind. Spring water pools in the cow's footprint. Hedgehog, fox and badger cross and crisscross these fields we call Willies or Jimmies or Jacks as the calf stumbles on all fours, feeling his way. After reading Homer's Iliad, I was entranced by the games played in honor of Patroclus. I thought about my own death and what games I might like to have played after my burial, and as I usually say at this point to my family, no pressure. Funeral games after the burial of Patroclus. After I am buried, let the celebrations begin. Instead of a chariot race, walk in the forest where Jack's field used to be. In place of a fist fight, a gentle run on the sands of Harbour View. Instead of a wrestling match, a swim after the run. In place of a quarter-mile sprint, a drink at the Pink Elephant. Instead of a fight in full armour, a walk up Malachanish. In place of throwing a meteorite, a cycle up the windy gap. Instead of hitting a dove, a walk above Dispensary Cross to look north, south, east and west. In place of throwing a spear, stand in our forest and listen. Urchin. In memoriam, Alan, Curdy. Heads down, we walk on harbour view, find the white heart shapes of the sea potato, light as a feather, empty of life. Small holes in a precise pattern, visible now that the soft spines to fend off predators are no longer needed. Alan Curdy's family tried to reach the Greek island of Kos from the seaside town of Bodrum, Turkey, when their rubber boat capsized in September 2015. 5 people died in the incident, including his mother, Rihanna, brother, Galib, and 2 others who were on the vessel. The only member of the family to survive was his father, Abdullah. Walking on the beach a few days later, I came across the empty shells of the sea urchins. But prayer was not enough. It was because he loved her, he went to Mass, tried to be as good as she desired him to be. He prayed, but not to God. He prayed that she would be his, and so it was. He learned to say the rosary, so as father to his children, he could lead the way. I saw through to his own godliness, his pure goodness, how he lifted his board and plastered a wall, signed his name in cement as if he had built a poem, and he had a poem and a prayer to withstand the rain and cold, to withstand time. Father to daughter, for Rafik Kathwari. Do you realize there's a war going on? I didn't. Used to being stopped at security checkpoints, Strabane, Auchnacloy. Sounds of war do not stifle a 22-year-old. Lights out, blinds down, pretend we are invisible as our plane prepares to land. At work, Ahmed pours sweet tea, small glass too hot to hold. An Arab friend gently plucks stray hairs from my face, working thread with fingers. High fashion, handmade from Burda patterns, covered for mosque with a baye. 5 women dressed in black on our way to Gailani Mosque. A letter goes astray to Tehran, but finds me safe on Haifa Street, Baghdad. I wrote that poem after reading a post on Facebook by Rafik Kathwari, who I first heard at Ovale. His post was about Tony Blair, going to be put on trial for war crimes, 2016. It was 30 years after I returned from Baghdad before I wrote a poem touching on my experience there. The story of a city and its people continuing to live and work in the midst of war. And so it goes on. With love from those who hate. The earth on its axis circles the sun. Put a near trumpet to this spinning womb. You'll hear the fighting of our brothers and sisters through veins of rivers and mountains. Most of us talking at once. Few listening as the bombs are placed with love from those who hate. We bury our memories of Baghdad, Bamako, Belfast, Beirut, Cairo, Casablanca, Madrid, Monaghan, Paris, London, and all those unnamed places, unmarked graves, to be unearthed by the next generation in stories kindled to celebrate as they launch into orbit another poisoned arrow. This poem was a response to the bombings in Paris in November 2015. After all the hatred, war, death, let's have a little love. Mycelium. A mushroom, its head above the ground, threads below casting a web, carrying water to the roots of oak, ash, hazel. We gorge on truffle, admire chanterelle, and avoid the enticing fly agaric. Thread from baby to mother, that cord, though broken, still connected by an unseen strand of tissue. A forest floor erupts. Love is always here. The last walk in memoriam, Taig McSivnia. I walk through the forest, carrying the sadness of your leaving. You make your way among the trees, rust body with white-tipped tail, stopping, sitting, staring, you at me and me at you. After, you turn away and step through the undergrowth. Knitting Days, in memoriam, Bella Gallagher, 1920-1997. I hear your needles clicking, knitting a jumper, all those hanks of wool rolled into balls. Pattern in your head, in your hands, diamonds, emerging as a sculptor carves to release the form within. You knitted me my long red cardigan, green fleck for our son, along with hat and scarf to match, brown for his father. Knitting our days together, only the moths will unravel. Whale song. I sent my song, a whale song, underneath the waves in the deep sea. I once saw the bottom, clear as glass. I sent my love a whale song. No words fit the melody. Better the sounds we don't understand, a tune for the heart, for the in and out, for the ups and downs. I sent you these words over land and sea, on top of the waves in a boat made of steel and a bicycle with rusty wheels. I have lost the song of the whale, now my own words must do. I will end my reading with two poems from the Risen Tree. Thank you all for your attentive listening, and thanks again to Paul Casey and all those involved in today's event. Captive. Fling wide the gates, open the ancient doors. Psalm 24:7. Let the caged birds fly. You who have held them prisoner, kneel down and pray. Sing out all you know. Sing loud in praise of those who now look down on you. Listen to their song and know what you hear is the word of angels. Crow Song. I sing a hymn of thanksgiving, Psalm 26:7. I haven't yet learned how to sing the song of the crow. Each time I start, I miss hitting the right note. I am too low or too high. I reach down when I need to go up and up when I should drop. Every day I start again where I think the beginning is and take crow steps, looking right and left, and then I take off. Thank you very much.
Bernadette, thank you so much. I feel like I learned a lot from listening to you. Thank you. Anton Floyd was born in Cairo. He studied English at Trinity College, Dublin, and UCC. He's a several times prize winner and was awarded the 2019 DS Arts Foundation Prize for Poetry in Scotland. His poetry collections are Falling into Place, Revival Press, and The Depositions, Dwyer Press, 2022. Give him a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to read a selection of poems, firstly from Falling into Place, which was published in 2018, and then from Depositions that was published 2 years ago in 2020, and then some new poems that are forthcoming. I'm going to read 4 haiku to begin with, and the convention is to read the haiku twice. So I'll read. Waiting in sheaths of ice, blades of grass. Waiting in sheaths of ice, blades of grass. Mountainside, waterfall pause, colonnade of light. Mountainside, waterfall pause, colonnade of light. The wind spilling starlings into the sky. The wind spilling starlings into the sky. Night swim in mountain water, touch of the moon. Night swim in mountain water, touch of the moon. This is a poem. I'm a great lover of Wallace Stevens, and he wrote a poem, The Disillusionment of 10 o'clock. And this is my response to that, and it's for 2 very dear friends who are in America, who won't allow me to visit them in Vermont while Trump is still alive. So this is for Daniel Lusk and Angela Patton. It's a love poem in a way. Last night I was asleep in my crisp white sheets, and now awake in my boots, I remember that I dreamed last night of baboons and periwinkles. And I remember the last part of the dream. It was of an insurance man in a train on his way home from the office, drunk with fatigue and asleep in his shoes. He was talking in his sleep. I think he was dreaming of sailors catching tigers in red weather. Today, I have decided to buy you a present, a beaded ceinture and socks of lace. And you may care to choose a pattern nightgown in any color combination, rings of green and purple or yellow and green rings, maybe hoops of blue and yellow. I shall fix the clock too. It shall be always 1 minute before 10 o'clock. Now, I have my son here in front of me, and this is a poem called This the Boy, when he was a little one. I grew up in the Middle East, and I'll come to that in a minute. But this is a poem called This the Boy, and it's on reading the poetry of Odysseus Elitis, and it's for Aegon. And so it's been very cold and snowy, and I thought maybe a bit of sunshine wouldn't go amiss. Mediterranean sunshine. This the boy, bare-skinned, deep-tanned, tousled hair bleached, his radiating curls like the rays of the sun in a child's every day is summertime drawing. These the days when hayrick giants cross barefoot fields, harvesting childhood sunshine. This is the country, the hillside vineyards slur the summer haze, where the still air clings to citric suns ripening, and cicada trees keen the overheat in ever mesmerizing echo drones. This the land, dry as olive bark, parched as powdered chalk. A scorpion is a medallion of stone, and under Byzantine domes, shouldering the press of noon, the golden icons of the risen Lord glow on whitewashed walls fringed by monkish pines. This, the island, the moving seas, sails testing the angle of the wind, desires pitching like proud reefs caught in the reels of the sun. These, the memories, like sea creatures sifting the silences, like pliant sponges wedded to the rocks beyond the reach of breathless divers. I live in West Cork, just in the foothills of the Shehi Mountains, and this poem is a love poem. We've been there 30 years and become part of the place in many ways. And this poem is called Signatures, and it plays on the idea of identity and a musical signature. Shehi Moor is one landmark in time's signature. Hills in this country dip and rise like swimmers' shoulders. Roots inch through earth like fingers intertwining. Here Brock tunnels his room, a vaulted arch. It cambers away from falling rain, shifting the ground of the unnamed dead. Streams delve into mottled valleys, veining the landscape. Everywhere surfaces record elemental codes, palimpsests of lifetimes. Every kind of life sifting hungers to a precise scale, and as accidental as moonlight slanting on lake water. To walk this land is to feel the weight of time's striations, a common heritage reaching back ever before local myths began. And so even as we weather time together and fold this landscape into our daily lives, we know time will one day claim us as Shehi's own unknown dead, and then unknowable too, how precisely now my love keeps time with your heart's signature. Walter Benjamin was the Jewish philosopher who tried to escape from Nazi persecution and was very fearful that he wouldn't be able to get a visa to America, and in desperation he took his own life. But he wrote a meditation based on a Paul Klee painting called The Angel of History. And so I wanted to respond to his meditation because I felt that it was a bit too depressing for me, and I wasn't feeling at all suicidal. So I thought that a response would be that. So this is an angel of history. See his angel of history with wings outspread, turn to face the past and stare open-mouthed at the single catastrophe. His world lies wrecked. Before him all is in ruin. Though he looks fixedly, he sees memories fading, blown from view. That storm in paradise that raged in the past, he sees it raging still. The angel cannot stop it, wants to but cannot stay, wants to redeem our state from the mere mind and the leaden heart, wants to make whole what is dashed and lost. But his wings are caught in the maelstrom. It propels him backwards, irresistibly out of time, leaving us to progress under the piling ash that grows skywards minute by minute. We sift from the debris vestiges of hope. This is a poem called Lazarus, and it's for my poetry mentor from many, many years ago. Took me under his wing in 1971, and he gave me some advice. He said, if you can cut a word out in a poem, cut it out. So he lived in Cyprus for a while and then became literary editor of the Athenian Post. He lived on an island, Syros Island, in the Cyclades in Greece, spoke 7 or 8 languages, and was an extraordinary man, and was a translator of a wonderful Czech writer, Ondra Lizahorsky, who had been persecuted because he chose to write in Latvian, which is a minority language. It wasn't one of the official languages of the Soviet Union. It wasn't German, Russian, or Czech. And he almost single-handedly made an oral language, a literary language. And he lived in a small room. All his work had been excised from all the textbooks and anthologies. His poetry books were consigned to the fire and so on. And Hugh got me to write to Ondra as part of an Amnesty International program to persecuted poets, just little postcards. We're thinking of you. Never knew if he received them or not, but just for him to realize that he wasn't alone. His poems were eventually smuggled out. They'd been written in his own blood on bits of paper, and they were translated by Hugh McKinley and W.H. Auden, as it happens. So this is a poem, Lazarus, and it has an epigraph from a survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. If you could lick my heart, it would poison you. At coastal Kittian, the sough of waves, the breezes in the palms, the underscore the night, and riding wavelengths of another sort are midnight sounds, human noises confirming in houses and waterfront cafes, apartments and hotels, in the revel rout of neon bars around the minarets and towers, the complexities of love and sleaze around the port. And the port here is Larnaca in Cyprus, where Lazarus is reportedly gone and is buried there. And in the church there, there's an icon, supposedly the only icon that is a representation of Christ, a likeness of Christ. There's stillness in that current's swirl where Byzantine domes harbor the icon of the relic saint, he who on these cathedral walls in the auric glow of awe and pity sets the perennial question of the dark, and to assuage their angel hunger, they light 1,000,000 candles, the pilgrims from the streets, flaming tongues to purge the vanities that poison their conceits, and in his mythic presence make bonfires of their hearts. Rough-hewn steps lead down to the second grave of the man from Bethany. He, the 4 days dead, in the stench of desiccated breath, unwound his alien tales, scrolled on the linen of his winding sheet, tales that reset his world like a black star on a bobbin spinning. Lazarus iconic, Lazarus the saint, relived his life and wanted it darker. His laughter turned to mourning for the lost in the abyss. And the magic of these candles burning, mirrored in this gold, is the dancing of a firelight that's cold. So that's a few poems from this. Now, I don't particularly, maybe not, just by way of an introduction to the next book, Depositions, I want to read a poem. It's called Through Slatted Shutters, December 1963. In Nicosia, there was an outbreak of intercommunal violence in Cyprus as a result of an unworkable constitution and a lot of frustration. No act of parliament was passed. It was vetoed by the Turkish minority. And so the Greeks got very upset, became very violent, and there were massacres happening all around the place. We lived in a cosmopolitan area of Nicosia called Constantia, and our GP, who was 4 doors down, on this night of Christmas Eve, he and his family were massacred, and it's now the Turkish Museum of Barbarism. And so tensions were very, very high, and so we became displaced, and this poem recounts how we became displaced. Through Slatted Shutters, December 1963. The days before Christmas were clear and cold. It was all week. Time enough to perfect cornering on my racing green rally bike, the pedals skimming the tarmac. That morning with Mikis and Errol promised the art of look, no hands riding. Sunlight poured through slatted shutters. Shadows raked the walls, the pattern as defined as the bullet holes in the veranda from the night's street fighting. And I slept through it all. The strafing of houses, the cackle of gunfire, the shootings and reprisals, Cypriot neighbors, Turk and Greek, cowering in our basement. Through the slatted shutters, I saw them, Turkish militiamen, a moving line owning the field. They came to commandeer our house, allowing us our last breakfast at gunpoint. The weight of my father's hand, I feel its imprint on my shoulder, the fret my mother carried. That December morning, we left by the kitchen door, passing under the orange tree. My father, looking up, said, "No other oranges will ever taste as sweet." And I saw at that moment clearly how the ripe oranges gleamed, blossom and fruit on the same tree. So, that experience and a family history of displacement from the Lebanon on my maternal side, from Tyre and Sidon. There was a pogrom in 1860 when the family, there were 12,000 people massacred by Muslim and Druze against the Christian Maronite community. And so the family was forced to leave the Lebanon. They went to Palestine and to Egypt. And my uncle Charlie set up business in Palestine and was very successful. It wasn't an empty place. Palestine wasn't an empty place full of nomads and sheep and goats. And I recently saw a documentary on Palestine on Al Jazeera television, and they were talking about how sophisticated the business world was in Palestine, and they featured Charlie Gallagher in that, so I felt very proud of that. And he had been a freedom fighter fighting against the Ottomans, who were the Turkish Empire at the time, and he reported directly to Lawrence of Arabia And he worked with the Nili group, who were Israeli fighters, and so on. But after 1948, he was a hotelier in just at the bottom of Mount Carmel in a German colony there. The beautiful house turned into a hotel. The Nakba happened, 1948. They went to Beirut because they knew there'd been quite a lot of trouble and fighting. They went to Beirut, came back, and he found that the hotel had been commandeered by Israelis. And eventually his businesses were closed down or went into different hands, and they had to leave Palestine. So they left Palestine. Another branch of the family went to Egypt. In 1950, the family was forced out of business there because they were interlopers. I was born in Cairo, but in the mid-50s, we were forced out of Egypt, and we ended up in Cyprus in the middle of a war. And my two brothers were wounded during the War of Independence there. So all these experiences fed into my life. I had a wonderful childhood in that part of the world. And when we married, we decided to go back. And we went back 1979, 1980. 1982, the war in the Lebanon happened, and we were flooded with refugees from the Lebanon there, many of whom I'm still in touch with, friends and so on. So all these stories of family, people that we became friendly with, they started to play on my mind and in my heart. And I eventually wrote 120 tercets, 3-line poems that were channeling this experience. And this book, Depositions, then came of it. And I had a kind of a worry that there was imposter syndrome. So I would go down to direct provision centers, and I would read the poems to refugees and say, do they resonate with you? And they said, we translate them. And my halting French, and translate them into French, and then Lingala, and then Tigrina, and then Arabic, and then Urdu, and so on. And eventually it became 20 languages. And I'm just going to read a sample of some of these tercets. And there are 2 troilets that introduce them in a way. A troilet are poems of repetition. There are 8 syllables and 8 lines. And there are lines that are repeated. The first one is called Time's Plague, and I think it's quite apposite given what's been happening across the pond, what's happening and the shift to the right all over the world, really. And it's a play on a line from Gloucester and King Lear. It's the time's plague when madmen lead the blind blithely towards the cliff and blames their one and only creed. It's the time's plague when madmen lead and clowns are licensed to proceed with truth set rudderless adrift. It's the time's plague when madmen lead the blind blithely towards the cliff. And the second one is Crossfire, and I think it tells the story of the book. The innocent all have voices. The sounds replay inside my head, their futures and all their choices. The innocent all have voices. Hope is gone when fear eclipses. The exile path fills all with dread. The innocent all have voices. The sounds replay inside my head. Now, there are 7 sections. One more. Okay. There are 7 sections in the book, and I'm going to read just a few from a section called The Give and Take of the Sea. The sea air, clothes carrying the fume of war. Open waters, or threading the narrows, a choice of wakes. Package deals, containers trading in lives, the dark arts. Hell and high water, whatever the cost, come hell or high water. Anchors, a splash of rust, rattle of fetters. Riding the wave wash, siren calls. Waves thud, heavy against the prow, concussion of bombs. And I'm just going to finish up with a little sonnet here. It's called Unholy. And it's a poem that's dedicated to Ilan Pappé. Ilan Pappé is an academic. He's a professor of Middle Eastern Studies at Exeter University. He's been cancelled by Israeli academics because he said that the Project Israel had been hijacked by Zionism. And he speaks truth to power. And so the lines in this poem are taken again from Shakespeare. And I wrote to Ilan and I said, I'd like to dedicate this poem to you. And he said, please do, thank you. And it's published in Swerve. Unholy. It offends to the soul, all those hate-filled speeches, this war of words beyond control. With such hideous violence, they let slip the dogs of war. They are tearing a world in pieces and stain it with innocent blood. It is unholy and inexplicable how they justify their methods, a madness to bomb an entire people starved and corralled in a strip of land not tomb enough to hide the dead. To this massacre, bear witness. For shame, it out-Herods Herod. So thank you very much indeed for...
Anton, thank you so much. You have a beautiful way of words, but deep messages in between. Thank you. I got 3 questions. One from Bernadette, one from Anton, one for the both of you. No pressure. Bernadette, you talked with the Evening Echo back in October with the launch of your book, and you said poetry chose me. Do you want to talk a bit about that and about that inspiring statement, a bit about your journey? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, I guess most of my reading throughout my life has been prose. So it was prose that I imagined I would eventually write, because I always had a strong feeling I would write. But it wasn't prose that came. I still, I write essays, etc. But I have never ventured into short stories or the idea of a novel or anything like that. It's poetry that has just come to me. That's it.
A natural. It's beautiful. I totally agree that you're very talented. And so is Anton. Anton, congratulations becoming an artist with UNESCO RILA up in Glasgow. RILA stands for Refugee Integration to Language and the Arts. And I know you spoke a little bit about it during your reading, but I want to ask, how can arts and poetry play a part with spreading the word of refugees and their challenges? And maybe you could speak about what you're up to in Scotland with UNESCO RILA. I want to hear more about that because it sounded fascinating. Thank you.
the refugee experience is devastating and very traumatic. And very often the trauma goes so deep that people don't have the language in order to explain, even to themselves. All they know is loss. And I know that personally, in that about just over 20 years ago, my third son, who was Francophone, heard that there were 2 refugee boys in the direct provision centre on Pope's Quay, just down the road from where we were this morning, and that they were boys amongst men and they were completely lost. And he went down to try and help them with their English. And he said, "Dad, you know, these lads, they don't like the food, they don't feel comfortable. Can they come out to the house for the weekend?" So they came and they never left. And we are now honorary grandparents to 10 Congolese, half Cameroonian and Rwandan, and children, and they're wonderful. And writing the poems, I felt I had to get it out of my own system first. But then I discovered that through meeting refugees in direct provision centres and workshopping the poems, refining the poems for me and for them, that they started to resonate very strongly with their experiences, and it gave them permission to talk. And without being a psychotherapist, I felt a little bit nervous. I mean, I've 42 years of being a teacher and differentiated learning in a classroom and that sort of thing. So, but I still felt that I was a little bit outside my comfort zone. But it was very reassuring to see that people were responding and they're saying, yes, this resonates with me. This allows me to delve deeper into my own experiences. And by naming them, to take away that fear. And it was a vindication for me. And then, having written haiku for a lot of the time, these tercets were like senryu, but they were breaking the rules of haiku, and I felt maybe shouldn't really call them haiku like a tercet. Then I came across a whole body of work that was written by Japanese haiku poets during and after the Second World War, in which they were using the language to explain to themselves what the atrocities were, the things that they had perpetrated and was perpetrated against them, and to debunk the myth of dying for the emperor and so on. And so post facto, I felt, yes, this was on the right course. So on that side of things, I'm a great admirer of Alison Phipps, who runs the RELA department at the University of Glasgow, which is a UNESCO-funded department there that deals with refugees. Been doing a lot of work with Gallagher. She is a public intellectual. I'm also involved in the poetry, at the Centre for Poetry Innovation at St Andrews at university in Scotland. And talking to the professors there, they would say, well, we're supervising 1 or 2 PhDs. You know, Alison currently is supervising 17. I don't know how she does it. And she's now publishing a book of poetry. So what RELA do, it's in fact, they've added an E into the acronym. So it's Refugee Integration Through Education, Literature and the Arts. And so it tries to make real the literature and the artistic experience that speaks to the common human experience, and tries to create a sense of empathy. I felt very strongly when I was writing depositions, where we live, there was a clachan at the back up in the Carrickdangan townland, where 9 out of 10 families perished in the famine. And consequently, people were displaced, forcibly displaced out of Ireland. You go to the Famine Museum in Skibbereen, and it's heartbreaking. And I felt that these poems would resonate with an Irish audience readership in order to get the sense of empathy across, that this is not an experience that's confined to sub-Saharan Africa or to the Middle East or persecuted people around the world. In Sudan, for instance, or even the Kurds in Syria. Erdogan has just bombed the infrastructure there that's denying water to 1 million people. Can you imagine that kind of thing? So I asked Joseph Watson, Professor of Irish Studies at UCD, if he would translate the poems into Irish. And then it kind of worked beyond that. And then this Dazzling Spark Foundation that had recognized my work in Falling Into Place got hold of depositions that was published by Dura, and he said, well, we want to publish it in the Celtic languages. So it took me to Scotland, and the poems were translated into Scots Gaelic by the Macker, Marcus MacAntorna, who's been here to read. And he translated them into Scottish, got a Welsh poet translated into Welsh, illustrated by my wife, designed by Aegon, published in a case book, and it was chosen by the Scottish National Library for Poetry Day as the featured book. And it's been an extraordinary ride. But then I did a tour of the Western Isles, where Scots Gaelic is spoken, with a very strong and powerful identity. And the resonances of displacement and loss are so powerful. I read in Northton, in South Harris, which is an island. It's really an extension of Lewis, but it's probably just about 2/3 of the size of Cork. 1,200 people there. Place is empty. There's clearances just cleared the land. It's a very empty space. And then when I read from depositions, the give and take of the sea, for instance, we realized that they're all fishermen, the loss in the sea, the sense of having to escape the island because there was nothing there for them, was palpable. And so those kinds of resonances happen. And maybe if I can give you one example. Can I?
Very quickly.
Very quickly.
Because you're out of time. Thank you very much.
Reading in Scotland, in Glasgow, the Interfaith Scotland invited me to go and read, and I generally try to get people to come and read in their own languages. And they'd arranged for this Rwandan woman to come and read, and she was 33 years old. And she read in Kiswahili and she read in French, and she read very movingly. And afterwards I'd said my thanks. She said, I want to say something. And she got up and she said, when the Rwanda massacres happened, I lost both my parents. I was 13 years of age. I had a 10-year-old sister and an 8-year-old brother. We ran off into the jungle, and we foraged for 3 years. And we lost my younger brother through illness and disease. And eventually the United Nations found us, and we were given asylum in Edinburgh, and they'd been in Edinburgh for about 13 years. And she said, I've always wanted to write my book. And she said, I've read this now and I don't need to. Which was, so to answer your question, what can it do? It's a fluke, really. I never anticipated that it would. I thought it was cathartic for me. But, and I couldn't justify making any money personally on the book. So all the proceeds from both editions of the book go to the UNHCR. And so far we've raised 6,000 euros for UNHCR, and probably we're on our way to double that by the time it's run its course. So if you're buying it, you're not supporting me, you're supporting a very wonderful organization that does very valuable work. Very little of the money goes into administration, it goes directly to the people who need it. And until such time as a better organization comes along, that's what we have to live with. So thank you very much. Sorry for...
Thank you so much, Anton. A lot of stories there, but a lot you can learn from that. And congratulations once again. Bernadette, that's one more question for you. I'm sure there are a lot of, well, I have a chat book in my laptop that is just staying there for ages, and I don't know quite what to do with it. I'm sure there's many other writers just like myself that doesn't know how to approach the publishing world because it seems so different and so foreign and so scary, actually, and challenging. What's your advice for poets that want to enter into the publishing world and want to actually get their stuff out there to bookshops or poetry friends? I'm not sure, but if you have any advice anyway, that would be fantastic for any poets that are at that stage.
I think we have chatted about this on a one-to-one basis. I think you're doing, what any poet should do. Go to Avail if you have something like Avail in your locality. It's a fantastic place to go and read your work because you can find out something about it in reading it that you don't when you've just written it down. So read it out loud, read it in public, and get as many poems published in journals as possible, and maybe do some workshops, etc. But it's a journey. My debut publication that was published this year by Revival Press, it's taken 10 years of writing, I guess, writing consistently. The book that appeared was not the book that I had envisaged would appear. So I think you have to just be open to that as well, that we plan things, but what we plan doesn't necessarily work out. So I say just be open and keep at it.
Thank you very much, Bernadette. Thank you so much once again for Anton, Bernadette, for such beautiful words, beautiful stories, beautiful poetry. Give it a huge boule de boss. Thank you very much.